When James Miller turned 70, he thought he had life figured out. He had worked 45 years as a carpenter, built a beautiful home in Ohio for his wife Linda, and raised 2 children who were now grown with families of their own. He still loved tinkering in his garage, fixing old furniture, and mowing his lawn every Saturday morning. To James, age was just a number until a routine doctor's appointment changed everything. James had always been healthy. Apart from the occasional backache and a little stiffness in his knees, he never worried much about his health. But Linda, who was 72 and had her fair share of health checkups, insisted that James book a visit to his primary care doctor. "Better safe than sorry," she said one morning as she poured him a cup of coffee at their kitchen table. James laughed. "Linda, I feel fine. Why go see a doctor if nothing's wrong?" But Linda gave him that look he knew all too well, the one that meant she wasn't backing down. "Because after 70, things can sneak up on you," she replied softly. "And sometimes what you don't know can hurt you." So, reluctantly, James made the appointment. What happened next opened his eyes, not just to his own health, but to truths about aging and medical care that no one had ever told him. Over time, he realized there were 5 hidden truths every person over 70 should know before stepping into a doctor's office. And those truths not only changed the way James saw his health, they changed the way he lived the rest of his life. The first truth: not every test is meant for you. James's first surprise came during his initial consultation. The doctor, a friendly man in his 40s named Dr. Eric Coleman, greeted him warmly and began reviewing his medical history. After a quick physical exam, Dr. Coleman pulled out a long list of screening tests. "Since you've just turned 70, he explained, "we usually recommend certain tests: colonoscopies, heart scans, bone density exams, and a few more." James frowned. "That sounds like a lot. Do I really need all of that?" Dr. Coleman leaned forward. "That depends. The truth is, not every test is useful or safe for every person over 70. Some tests might bring more harm than good." James blinked. "Harm? From a test?" Linda, sitting beside him, squeezed his hand. She too looked surprised. Dr. Coleman nodded. "Yes. Some screenings are designed to catch problems early, but at your age, certain procedures may expose you to unnecessary risks. For example, some scans use high levels of radiation, or invasive tests might cause complications. And in some cases, what we find may not even impact your life expectancy or quality of life. That's why we always weigh the pros and cons carefully." That night, James sat in his recliner replaying the conversation in his mind. All his life, he had believed doctors knew best, and if they ordered a test, it must be necessary. But now he realized that wasn't always true. Sometimes saying no to a test was just as important as saying yes. The second truth: medications can do more harm than good. A few weeks later, James returned for his follow-up. This time, the topic was medications. Dr. Coleman explained gently, "As we get older, our bodies don't process drugs the same way they used to. Medications that were safe at 50 can be risky at 70. James raised an eyebrow. "I don't take much. Just something for my blood pressure." Dr. Coleman smiled. "That's good. But many seniors end up on 5, 10, sometimes even 15 different prescriptions. And the problem is, those drugs can interact in dangerous ways. Some cause dizziness, confusion, or even memory loss. Others increase the risk of falls." Linda's eyes widened. "So people think they're helping themselves, but they're actually making things worse?" "Exactly," Dr. Coleman replied. "That's why it's important to review all medications regularly. Sometimes the best prescription is actually fewer pills." That night at dinner, James shared what he'd learned with his daughter, Karen, who had stopped by with her kids. She gasped. "Dad, that makes so much sense. Remember Grandma? She was taking 12 different medications before she passed, and half the time she didn't even know what they were for. She was always tired and dizzy." James nodded slowly. "I never thought about it back then. But maybe the medicine did more harm than good." For James, that second truth was an awakening. He realized that being cautious about medications wasn't about distrusting doctors. It was about protecting himself from unnecessary harm. The third truth: doctors don't always know your priorities. A month later, James had another appointment. This time, he brought a list of questions he had written down on a yellow notepad. One question in particular weighed heavily on his mind. What mattered more, living longer or living better? When James asked, Dr. Coleman paused. That's a good question, James. Medical training often teaches us to focus on adding years to life. But for many people over 70, the real goal isn't just more years, it's better years. It's about quality of life. James thought about that for a long moment. So, if a treatment keeps me alive but leaves me weak and miserable, that might not be the right choice for me? Exactly, Dr. Coleman said. You have the right to decide what matters most to you. Do you want aggressive treatments at all costs? Or do you prefer comfort, independence, and time with your family? Every patient has their own priorities. That night, James sat on his porch swing with Linda. Fireflies lit up the summer sky as he turned to her. I realized something today. If I only had a few years left, I'd rather spend them laughing with you, playing with the grandkids, and working in my shop than lying in a hospital bed hooked up to machines. Linda's eyes filled with tears. Me too, James. That's exactly how I feel. The third truth struck James harder than the first two. It wasn't just about tests or pills, it was about life itself. The fourth truth: you must advocate for yourself. One morning, James accompanied his neighbor, George, to a doctor's appointment. George, who was 75, had been experiencing fatigue and shortness of breath. The doctor rushed through the visit, barely letting George speak before prescribing medication. On the drive home, George sighed. I didn't even get to tell him about the chest pain I've been having. James frowned. Why didn't you say something? I didn't want to bother him. He seemed in a hurry, George replied. That conversation stayed with James. At his next appointment, he noticed the same thing. Dr. Coleman was kind but busy, juggling multiple patients. James realized if he didn't speak up, he might not get the care he needed. So, James began advocating for himself. He brought his list of questions. He asked for explanations. He said, Doctor, I don't understand this. Can you explain it again? And the difference was remarkable. Dr. Coleman slowed down, listened carefully, and gave James the clarity he needed. That was the fourth truth. No one will fight for your health more than you. The fifth truth: prevention is still the best medicine. The final lesson James learned was perhaps the simplest, but also the most powerful. At 70, he assumed it was too late to make big changes. What's the point, he often told Linda. I'm already old. But one day, during a community health seminar, a guest speaker, a 78-year-old retired nurse named Margaret, changed his perspective.